Welcome everybody to this webinar on the UK United States collaborative projects for offshore wind. My name's Chris Bagley. I'm Head of Clean Energy and Infrastructure at Knowledge Transfer Network, KTN, and it's my pleasure and indeed privilege to be host for today's webinar. We've got a really good agenda coming up, but quick word now on some of the housekeeping issues. This session will be recorded and it'll be available afterwards for people to peruse at their leisure. All attendees, you will be muted at throughout the webinar, but you'll be able to pose questions in the Q&A box that you'll see as a part of your YouTube feed there. So as the questions occur to you, please do pop something in there, and what we'll do is make sure that the panel are in a position where they can have a look at some of those. A quick look at the agenda then going forward. As I said, it's quite a packed one. We've got a brief overview of COP26 and the goals, an introduction to what's going on. Then we've got a really neat fireside chat where some of the projects are talking about what's been going on. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a Q&A session. So once again, do put those things in the Q&A box, then some final remarks, and then we'll be closing around about 4:15 in the UK and 12:15 to those in the United States on EDT. So that's what we're going to be doing. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. This is Dr. Peter Abbott. Peter is the British Consul General in Boston, Massachusetts. He's been a member of Her Majesty's Diplomatic Service for some 15 years now, and he's heading our diplomatic side of things over in the United States. So without further ado, Peter, over to you.
Chris, thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction, and to you and all at KTN for your support for this webinar today. As you said, my name is Peter Abbott. I'm the British Consul General to New England, based in Boston. I just wanted to say at the outset a huge thanks also to Roger Townsend at Innovate UK, to Carrie, Hitt at NOWRDC, all the speakers and all of those behind the scenes who have helped to make this work. So a huge thank you to everybody for being involved. Chris, as you've said, I'm going to say a few words about COP26 and kind of set a little bit of the broader context before we get into the detail of today's event. So COP26 opened in Glasgow on Sunday. It's the largest event of its kind the UK has ever hosted. More than 130 heads of state and government, around 25,000 delegates in Glasgow. And to have, we're not there yet, but to have even got to this far in the middle of a pandemic, I think is an extraordinary feat of technical and logistical engineering. What are the goals at COP? Well, the sort of the headline goal is to secure global net zero by the middle of the century and keep that 1.5 degrees target that was set in Paris 6 years ago within reach. I'm pleased to say that the majority of the global economy has now made commitments to reach net zero by the middle of the century. So there is progress happening. The second goal is to adapt to protect communities and natural habitats. And some of you may have seen the announcement from a couple of days ago at COP that well over 100 major countries have committed to reducing logging. That's about 80% of the world's forests are now under a greater degree of protection than they were before. The third goal is to mobilize at least $100 billion of climate finance per year. We're lagging a little bit behind that target. We're about 90% there. And hope to meet that target in 2023. And then the fourth goal really is how do we do this? Well, we have to work together to deliver these goals, turning ambition into action through collaboration. Now, the COP programme over this week and next week is split into several different themed days. We had finance yesterday, we've got science and innovation, transport, cities and regions coming up. But today's theme is energy, and that's why we are all here today to talk about accelerating momentum and ambition for the global transition to clean power. I mean, that transition needs to progress, we think, somewhere between 4 to 6 times faster than it is at present if we're going to meet the goals that were set at the Paris COP, as I said, 6 years ago. And harnessing the potential of offshore wind, we think, is absolutely central to meeting that target. Wind is, we know, the lowest cost, large-scale renewable energy source, and the price of it has come down very, very quickly indeed. I just want to read some figures out from UK estimates back in 2013. The UK government estimated then that by 2025, an offshore wind farm would generate electricity for about $192 per per megawatt hour. In 2016, 3 years later, that was revised down by 24%. In 2020, it was revised down again by another 47%, which is sort of around a 60% drop in offshore wind costs in around 7 years. We've also seen extraordinary technological developments. There's been a 72% increase in average turbine size in the past decade alone, and one rotation of GE's new Haliade X blade can power a UK household for about 2 days. That's just one turn of the turbine, so it's absolutely extraordinary. We're also seeing increasing numbers of countries committing to increasing their offshore wind capabilities and capacities. The UK already has the largest amount of installed offshore wind capacity anywhere in the world, including the world's only floating offshore wind farm, the Hywind wind farm off the coast of Scotland. And now the US and the UK together have committed to deploy an additional 70 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. This feels to me here in New England most obvious in Massachusetts, where BOEM's approval of the Vineyard Wind project back in March has put the Bay State on course to host America's first industrial scale wind farm and reignited, I think, interest up and down the eastern seaboard and beyond. But success, I think, in this field depends not just on national action, but on international and cross-sectoral collaboration. Everyone on this call will know that the UK and the US have a remarkable record of cooperation on joint research across the board, but we're particularly proud of some of the relationships and partnerships that have been signed in New England in the offshore wind sphere. And before I finish, I just want to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of those partnerships. We've signed a memorandum of understanding between the ORE Catapult in the UK and MassCEC to support wind blade testing just up the road from where I'm sitting now on the Charles River. A formal partnership between Rhode Island and the Team Humber Marine Alliance to help Rhode Island develop its offshore wind strategy. And a unique clean energy partnership that we signed between the UK and the state of Maine to share clean energy technologies, business opportunities, and pursue academic relationships on clean energy as well. UK expertise sits at the heart of the National Offshore Wind Institute at Bristol Community College in Massachusetts. And we're having constant conversations between US and UK parties on things like engaging with fishing communities, health and safety in offshore wind, clean hydrogen, floating offshore wind, AI and robotics. So it really is a very, very deep and broad relationship when it comes to cooperation on offshore wind between the US and the UK. And that's why I'm so delighted to be part of this event today, where we'll be showcasing 4 really key examples of where we've successfully marshaled UK and US resources for the purpose of offshore wind research and development. And all the projects featured here today are remarkable, and I really look forward to hearing more about them as we go through the course of the day. Chris, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for a great summary of the technical and market developments contributing to the positive impact being made by offshore wind, and not least, of course, to the collaborative initiative that we're here to talk through today. Against that background, I'd like to introduce Carrie Hitt and Roger Townsend as our 2 moderators for the next session, the Fireside Chat piece. Carrie Hitt is the Executive Director of the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium on the United States side, and here in the UK, Roger Townsend is the Innovation Lead for Renewables at Innovate UK. Carrie, perhaps I could hand over to you to take this forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. I'm just going to introduce the consortium just a bit before we get started with our conversation. So thank you so much for putting this together. It seems easy on the surface, but a lot of work went behind the scenes to get everyone in the room, which just is indicative of the collaboration that we've had. So I thought I'd just talk for just a quick minute about the relationship in the consortium. As many of you know, the consortium was established a few years ago in 2018 and has really been stood up in the past 2 years. We're sponsored by the Department of Energy, NYSERDA, and then several other states right now up and down the East Coast. And our members consist of a number of offshore wind developers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. And what we do is really sponsor R&D and innovation in offshore wind that will have an impact in the next 5 to 7 years. So really focused on projects that can deliver outcomes and innovation in that time period. And quite early on, even before my time here, both the National Offshore Wind R&D Consortium, which we called NOWRDC, and Innovate UK got together and signed an MOU to think about how we might collaborate early on. And what you're going to hear about today is a result of that collaboration, which has been really good, just in terms of figuring out how to work together, exchanging information, but also very specifically on these projects that we're going to speak to this morning. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Roger.
Carrie, thank you. And also I'd like to extend my thanks to Chris, to Peter, to our other speakers as well, and also to you for listening in to this Zoom YouTube broadcast. I'm Roger Townsend. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I work at Innovate UK, and Innovate UK is the UK's innovation agency, which is a non-departmental public body and part of UKRI. So what do we do? Well, we work with companies, government and academia to find and drive science and technology innovations which will help to grow UK economy. So we mean by that delivering productivity, new jobs and exports, particularly important topic here. So as innovation lead for renewables, I'm responsible for developing R&D programs which de-risk, enable and support innovation in this sector. So how are we going to structure these next few minutes? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with our speakers, our project representatives, in a kind of a fireside chat. So this will feature those 4 collaborations that we've spoken about already between 4 US projects and 4 UK projects, which have all been supported either by NOWRDC or Innovate UK. And I'd like to introduce quickly our 4 project representatives. First of all, Jenny Hudson. Jenny is Business Development Director of Transmission Dynamics, who are a UK multi-award winning industrial Internet of Things company. David Newsom, who's Managing Director of Intelligent Moorings, a UK developer of innovative mooring load reduction systems, really applicable and suitable for large floating platforms, which will be key for our future growth plans. Paul Fleming, who is Principal Investigator for Wind Energy Control Systems at the US National Renewable Energy Lab. It's easier to say NREL. Paul is also co-lead operating agent for the IEA Wind Task 44, Wind Farm Flow Control. And finally, but not least at all, Anthony Kirincic, who is an associate scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and also chief scientist at Martha's Vineyard Coastal Observatory. So turning to our first project speaker, Jenny, it'd be really great if you could explain a little bit more about your UK project and also your US-UK collaboration. Jenny.
Sure, thanks, Roger. So our collaboration and the projects, both sides of the pond, are essentially about supporting the offshore renewable energy sector with optimising their operations and maintenance regimes. So it's all about reducing costs and downtime, looking at reducing the sector's own carbon emissions that result from extensive precautionary and manual maintenance regimes. So the focus, as it says on the slide, is around determining the optimal sensor placement for digital twins. Essentially, that's about understanding the value that we can get from existing data, from SCADA and CMS data, enhancing that with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and looking at to be able to do things like predictive maintenance modelling. Part of the project will be about identifying the gaps where that data isn't already available and where optimal sensor placement will be needed, and then putting all of that information into a physics-based digital twin. The core there is about looking at failure diagnosis and performance degradation modelling, understanding more about the assets. And essentially, we're doing exactly the same thing on both sides of the pond, albeit looking at different wind turbines and different parts of them with different models, but that's where the collaboration comes in. We're comparing and validating each other's work to make recommendations for the sector.
Jenny, that's great. Thank you. And I note your partners and projects on the right there. Really, really interesting. So thank you, Jenny. We'll pick up a couple of those thoughts a little later in the discussion. Thanks, Jenny. David, I'd like to pass the floor to you now. Perhaps you could explain your UK project and your US-UK collaboration.
Thank you, Roger. I'm David Newsom from Intelligent Moorings Limited. I'll give a very brief overview of our bilateral project. Our project scales up an innovative mooring component designed to reduce peak loadings on floating wind platforms. There's a broad scope between the UK and the US. The UK team is Intelligent Moorings and the University of Exeter, and the work in the UK looks to fabricate the quarter-scale IMS, do some initial single-leg coupled modelling, and then the programme transfers over to the US, where PCCI and OCG Inc. will undertake modelling of the OCG wind platform using the IMS, and then design and perform the quarter-scale load testing at sea. We're also supported by a range of subcontractors in the US, including ABS and NREL for some of the ODAC modelling. Some design assessment work will be taking place over there as well. So it's a great program between the UK and the US. There's initial work in the UK and then supported by some of the physical testing on the US side.
David, thank you. Very, very interesting, fascinating project, great collaboration. Thank you for that. Paul, I'd like to pass the floor to you now. I'll pass the virtual mic, and perhaps you could explain a little bit about your US project and your collaboration with the UK project.
Yes, thank you very much. So on the US side, we have this project, Wind Farm Control and Layout Optimization for US Offshore Wind Farms. We're hoping to investigate the ability to deploy these technologies of wind farm control, specifically wake steering, and layout optimization separately and combined to benefit the performance and cost of energy of US offshore. The project is divided into 4 tasks that focus first on looking at the ways in which US offshore conditions are different from the known conditions in EU wind farms, calibrating the engineering model, specifically our open source Flores model, for the US locations you see on the right, so 1 Atlantic, 1 Pacific, and 1 in Hawaii. Then in the second half of the project, we really turn towards looking at optimal deployments for each of these locations of the technologies of layout optimization and wake steering, again, separately and combined, and then finally a detailed cost modeling and analysis. You can see the project partners are NREL, where I am, and then also Cornell University and Equinor. If we go to the next slide, we can see the UK project Conflows, the control of floating wind farms for wake steering. And this project is focused on a similar topic, but specified for floating wind, and makes for a really nice complementary project. So you see in this figure from Conflows how the 2 projects are going to be collaborating continually throughout their timelines, whereas we'll be developing US-specific models for sort of standard offshore wind farms. They will be looking at floating specific technologies, and we'll be exchanging things such as our high fidelity simulation results and also modeling findings, and basically just continuously collaborating through the project. Their team is composed of DNV, Durham University, and Marine Power Systems. Yes, thank you very much.
Paul, thank you. Very insightful, really interesting project. And thank you for that, Paul. And finally, Anthony, perhaps you could explain your US project and also how you're collaborating here in the UK.
Thanks very much, Roger. So again, I'm from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We're a private nonprofit research institution focused on understanding the ocean, the atmosphere, and the climate system. For the past 20 years, our institution has run the offshore tower that's pictured here on the right of the slide, for studying air-sea interactions, measuring CO2 fluxes, understanding wind dynamics. And it's been a great basic science research tool for us and the research community in the US. Our tower also happens to be close to a number of the US-based lease areas that are coming online or in the coming years. And so through our NOWRDC project and previous funding from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, which was mentioned earlier, we've hosted wind energy specific sensors and offered the data as publicly available data set to both the industry and the research community. And I think that these observations have found their way into a number of the developers' bids for power purchase agreements here in the US. So the goal of this effort is to continue and expand our data collection effort. Obviously, there are a number of facilities like this in the UK and Europe already, but this is the first really met-ocean reference station in the US. And along with that, we're trying to demonstrate the usefulness to the industry in terms of lowering the levelized cost of energy. And so that's our project with both UL through their AWS True Power division, Paul's colleagues at NREL, and then we have a permitting contractor working with us, Epsilon, because part of this project of taking the observations that the industry can use is also using them to help validate new and emerging sensors. And this is a component that would be putting sensors on the tower, which I'll talk about next a little bit, but also for buoy validations offshore to occur in the US. Okay, next slide, please. So adding to our NOWRDC effort is this collaborative project that we've been working on with Catapult UK and Stoke Global. And the goal of this project is to test advanced vibration and acoustic monitoring sensors for large offshore structures and use those observations to inform fatigue-based structural modeling analysis of structures for the industry. Our existing tower, which you see there's a picture of here taken from a diver, it's starting to show its wear and tear after 20 years. And so the ability to put the Catapult UK and Stoke sensors onto the tower to understand how it's vibrating in wind and wave conditions and use those to push numerical models and structural health modeling really serves as a nice test bed for at-sea structural analysis. And so this collaborative effort will really help both the industry here in the US and in the UK.
Anthony, that's great. Thank you. And yes, so thanks to all our four speakers there for providing a bit of an introduction into both their projects and also their collaborations. And what we'd like to do now is to get a little bit more detail and to really understand how we're going to meet not just our net zero goals, but our very ambitious gigawatt scale increases in our generation capacity. So what we're going to do now is enter into a roundtable discussion. We have a few pre-prepared questions. Carrie is about to kick off with those. So our four speakers will answer, not in turn, but as they see fit. So over to you, Carrie.
Sorry, I did exactly what I was not supposed to do, which was to be muted. Anyway, thanks so much, Roger. Yeah, as Roger said, we're going to try to do a fireside chat here, a virtual one anyway, and really get some input from all our speakers, more detail on their projects, and then really talk about how we work together. So my first question is just an opportunity really to talk a bit more about your projects and what really what the outcomes will be and during the course of the term of the projects, whether they have, different phases where there are deliverables or what have you, or impacts. So Jenny, maybe we'll give you a chance to kick us off here. Can you talk a little bit more about what your expectation is with the results and what you plan to do with them from the work that you're doing? And then anyone else can jump in after Jenny gets a chance.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carrie. So as I said, the overall outcome of the project is about reducing the manual operations and maintenance regimes in the industry and hopefully getting, reduced costs and carbon emissions and downtime, all of those great things. But I guess in terms of specific deliverables for the project, we're doing a holistic sensor review. So there'll be a report outlining the value of SCADA data and identifying any gaps. So be able to sort of inform the industry of what we do know and what we need to know more of. We'll be putting together some initial machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms and a demo of a kind of physics-based digital twin so that we can demonstrate the value of that approach to industry. We'll be putting together a joint optimal sensor placement recommendation. So between the findings of the US and UK-based project, we'll be able to recommend what we think the industry can do with physics-based digital twins and the value of it to that industry. And also hopefully putting a white paper together so we can try and help influence and move towards those recommendations in the future.
That's great. Thanks so much. Just one quick follow-up on that. You might have said it at the beginning, but what's the timing a little bit on those? Is it next couple of years or?
Yes, so we're an 18-month project, and we are 7 months in. And so, yeah, all of those deliverables will be forthcoming. We will be finished the project around September 22.
Yeah, right. So quick, which is great. I mean, that's exactly why we're here today, right? Is to start to get these impacts and implement them. Any of our others, David or Paul or Anthony, want to speak more specifically about what your expectation is in the next couple of years for your projects?
Carrie, I can take that one as David Newsom. I think the two main outputs deliverables are modelling, particularly against the NREL 50 megawatt reference platform and the OCG platform. And that really lets us understand how load reduction could assist in reducing cost and LCOE. The ultimate aim is to reduce loads seen by moorings and the platform to enable cost savings to ultimately supporting net zero goals from this. The other deliverable will be the manufacture and test of a quarter load scale IMS proven in a sea trial environment in the US, probably on the eastern seaboard there. So I think it will really develop the product, the understanding of the product, how it integrates with floating wind systems as they develop through other developments within the market.
Great, thank you. Paul or Anthony, otherwise we can start talking a bit more about how we're collaborating, but I don't know if you want to add a bit more.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say real quick, one of our early deliverables will be a new release of the open source Flores model we have for the design and analysis of wind farm controls and layout optimizations. So that will include like the modifications we're making for large arrays and for different offshore conditions we're expecting to see in the US. And will also be substantially faster than previous versions. So I think this updated version of Flores is an important deliverable this calendar year. Then the project extends one more year where we do a lot of this analysis and try to get to the overall benefits of wick steering and layout optimization in these different conditions and release that as a public report of findings. So hoping to show where these technologies are most beneficial and how they can be combined to optimal benefit.
Fantastic. Anthony, would you like to add anything else?
Absolutely, Carrie. Yeah, there's two really main deliverables for the NOWRDC project that we have, and those kind of feed over into our US-UK collaborative. The first one is really data, right? I mean, one of our key things is to take as much data as we can on the met-ocean environment and then share that publicly for the use of the industry and the research community. Like folks like Paul and his group are, I think, using some of our data sets that we collect on the tower to inform and control their modeling in the region, right? So that's a huge key because that's just going to help everybody get a better estimate of the resource and reduce errors and reduce uncertainty, right? Reduce risk. The second really key deliverable is access and reducing barriers to access. Part of some of the hard things about doing buoy validations in the US is the permitting process can be long and arduous potentially, and it just takes a while to get things ready to go. The systems are there's a lot of systems already set up to do this in Europe and the UK, and but having the validations happen stateside near where they're going to be used in the water with the same buoy system is always going to be preferred and better. And so our twin goal is to really break down those barriers so that it's easy to have the systems out in place, and that's just kind of spur the whole process of getting the resource characterization running for a lot of these sites. And you can't scale up to having the many lease areas that we want to have here in the US without having the ability to do these sensor validations quickly and efficiently here in the US. And so that's kind of our second goal here. And that really spills over to our goals for the collaborative effort, is taking data to make sure that we understand how the structural health monitoring might work using vibration sensors and newer vibration sensors that are easy to deploy. It kind of feeds back to what Jenny was talking about a little bit, to what's the right digital twin for this effort, and then making sure that those data can inform models.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the collaboration itself, which everyone would say collaboration is beneficial, right? But maybe each of you can speak a bit to specifically this transatlantic relationship on each of these projects. What are some specific things where you actually see value in the effort? Kind of drilling down a little bit more in the details, and David, I'll pick on you first maybe, and then we'll go around.
So I think it's been really critical for our project in that there are limited collaborative partners in the UK for us to work with, and it really opened up a broad range of capability to pull this collaborative program together. I think one of the very important things, particularly for floating wind, is the UK and the US are two of the very key core markets for it, and it enables us to develop the engineering and the commercial development in parallel between those two markets. So it was very important for us, very useful collaboration, particularly with it being the UK and US with this market.
Carrie, can I just chime in next? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm going to echo David's statement that it was critical to have the partnership because that's where the expertise was, but obviously mine's the other direction, right? So, for understanding the structural health, as I said before, our tower is much smaller than a wind turbine foundation would be for a fixed platform, but it's a useful venue to use to understand how welds hold up after 20 years and how corrosion takes place and fatigue takes place. And so taking these estimates from the sensor technology companies that were located in the UK are really going to push us forward here in the US.
Yeah, I think that's to use the cliche, not picking up information and transferring it, and skills and knowledge it's just really important. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel, and we don't necessarily need to, or what might have been learned in the UK or earlier on can really help us build a good foundation, or vice versa if we're looking at projects on the other side. Paul or Jenny, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for our part, we have a few benefits from collaborating. One is the complementary expertise. So I think if you look at our project team, we have NREL and Cornell with our particular strengths. And then by working with UK, we get to work with DNV, sort of very well-known consultancy in wind energy, and also with Durham University and Marine Power bringing their respective expertise. So for example, Majid Basanka of Durham University is the originator of some of the models in our Flores code. And so by getting to work together on engineering improvements to engineering models, it's really efficient to work together. And the other big benefit for us is it allows this expansion into considerations of wind farm control for floating systems. And if we look at how that complements, if you look at some of the US sites we're considering, there can be deep water there, and floating might be the optimal solution. So it's good to have built into the project now, because of this collaboration, this ability to see, does the same results apply for floating systems, or do things fundamentally change?
Great. It's really good to hear the specific, translation, I guess I would say, or transfer. Jenny.
Yeah, I would just echo everybody else's points, really. I suppose specifically for our project, there are things like being able to compare the different models. So Tufts University leading the state side and ORIC, the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult on the UK side, have different assimilation and predictive modelling models, predictive analysis models, and being able to talk to each other about like-minded challenges, but look at different approaches is really helpful. It kind of fast tracks that process of knowledge transfer and getting the end result ready for industry. The other benefit for us is that we've got two wind turbines, if you like, two structural assets to base these sensors and the data on, and then that just accumulates more data. And for algorithms, we just need to feed the beast. It's all about having as much data from as many scenarios as possible to get the most value out of it, and to kind of sharpen up the tool that we're trying to develop for the industry. So that's particularly helpful for us working with the US projects.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you mentioned data. It's obviously, just a critical foundation to all the work that we're all doing across projects. And we at the consortium see that as I don't want to say a challenge, but coordination of data and aggregation and sharing of it is really a thing that we're focused on right now, about how to get that to be more efficient. And also to increase accessibility. So I went a bit off script, but it's a really important point that we're seeing as we continue to fund projects, that access to data is really, really important. and wherever we can get it, whether it be, from Europe, UK, Asia, or here, as things start to be deployed, will be really critical to the success of our R&D projects themselves. All right, with that, Roger, I think I'm going to turn it over to you now, and then we'll come back to me in a little bit. So thank you.
Great, Carrie, thank you. Just a quick note to our audience, please keep your questions coming. Delighted to see any and all questions that you might wish to pose. And thank you for that session. That was really insightful so far. I can really start to feel how we might meet our big gigawatt scale targets. Specifically, aside from cash, but I think cash is always important through grant, why is funding from NOWRDC and Innovate UK important? What are the other benefits do you see? And I'll go to Anthony.
I get to go first on this one. Nice. Well, it's always good to hang your and put an emblem on your slide when you're giving a talk, right? That says this was funded by NOWRDC, and so then you have the clout that you have the backing of your research and your data have the backing of that as an institution, right? So that's kind of a one thing there. Not to say that they actually sanction what you do as a researcher, but that it's helpful, right? I think it opens up doors both for the use of the data for the industry interactions and the scientific discovery that happens with it, but opens the collaborative effort. I don't think that I would have connected with my UK counterparts on my project had I not been already working with NOWRDC, right? It would not have happened. And so I think that's just a main component of it is things like I think the symposium that NOWRDC is hosting next week. This chat really allows you to explore the space of who can be a user of your data or a collaborator of your effort to make sure that you're casting a wide net and then you're getting as much information you can back from the audience.
Thanks, Anthony. Really great point. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of the really cool and disruptive innovation comes at those intersections, the intersection of people or sectors or technologies, and I think I see that as being really valuable in bringing teams together through the funding. Paul, I don't know whether you had anything to add at all around this, the benefit for funding.
Yeah, I was thinking about robustness. So from our point of view, we want to provide technologies that can be incorporated into the design phase of wind farms, which means you really, really have to trust them. And so having a consortium, an international consortium of some of the best known research institutes working together helps to make sure that we've checked everything a few different ways. For instance, DNV has their own separate tool chain and modeling chain and methodologies for evaluating things so that we are more confident overall at the end product that we can turn this over to industry and say it's been vetted by multiple parties using different methods. So I think I'll go with that answer.
Great answer, Paul. Thank you. David or Jenny, do you have anything to add at all? Perhaps David first.
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate what Anthony said there, having the badge of Innovate UK and NOWRDC, it really reduces risk for further investment and probably more importantly opens doors for future development of the technology. It's allowing developments at an early stage to enable sector development that could broadly benefit the entire sector. I think that's one of the important things that it stimulates. And also, particularly for us, it's created commercial relationships already in the US to exploit any successful product leading from this. So it's been very beneficial for us.
Thank you, David. Really good point. Jenny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just to echo the point earlier about data sharing and general collaboration, but those kind of cross-governmental, cross-transatlantic agreements, being able to have people like the organisations funding these projects looking after speaking on an SME basis from our perspective, being able to have the people in power talking about these projects and what we need to do to bring everybody together has been really beneficial. And I understand there is a big conversation between the UK and US at the moment about a data sharing policy for the offshore wind sector. Those sorts of things are going to be great outcomes from these projects as a whole.
Jenny, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I would echo all those points. Thank you. So innovation is difficult, right? And we also have a huge challenge that we need to meet. I don't have off the top of my head the target for the US, but certainly in the UK, we're talking about 100 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. We're kind of at around 10.5 and creeping up pretty quickly, but it's a big challenge, right? So specifically on these collaborative projects, where do you see the challenges? Or if you haven't faced any challenges so far, where do you foresee challenges, either in delivering your project or scaling as you plan? Perhaps I'll go with Paul.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think for challenges, we have a bunch. and I think some of them are the newness of some of the US offshore conditions. So not having built wind farms there before, we have meteorological data and the measurements that I think Anthony was talking about, but we don't have SCADA data from wind farms we can fall back on. So trying to do that projection from the EU farms to the US sides using modeling and things like that as an intermediary is an interesting challenge, and one I'm happy to be working with so many other institutes on.
Great. Well, thank you. Jenny?
Yeah, so one of the main challenges we see moving forward, and I think it's one that others will echo, is about this common barrier to entry when it comes to responsibility and ownership for applying technologies that are going to support the industry. So there seems to be a continual cycle between asset owners and the people who are responsible for maintaining them, and whose responsibility is it, and who should take the cost of applying new technologies in order to move the sector forward. I guess given that the operations and maintenance contracts are generally relatively short term, 2 or 3 years at a time, you can understand that there isn't a long-term investment in technologies and they want to push that back to asset owners. But of course, from the asset owner's perspective, they don't want to take on the additional costs when somebody else is responsible for maintaining the assets. So I guess we're just sort of hoping from our side, the project side, we're trying to minimize the costs associated with these technologies and help to drive the change that way and make it more acceptable, more palatable for people to take those investments on. But from again, a sort of a higher level, if you like, one of the things we're hoping to get from the likes of COP26 is some more recognition, ownership, some more incentives to help people to adopt those technologies and see the benefits moving forward.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a bit of a technology geek, an innovation geek, but innovation is in business models. It's in structures around ownership of and sharing of the cables and the networks undersea and the substations as well. So I think you raise a really good point there. David, any thoughts on challenges?
Yeah, so for our project, we have some very specific engineering challenges. It is a very aggressive environment we're looking to put something into, and they relate to tensile strength, marine growth, etc., as you'd expect. They're mostly significantly mitigated by using proven mooring fibers with no material properties. In very simple terms, we take a section of synthetic mooring line, re-engineer it with a pressurized core, and use that to control the IMS, control the load reduction, control it through the cycle. So those engineering challenges are the ones we're looking to meet, and that's really one of the core aims of this bilateral is to meet those engineering challenges and improve that through a siege round.
David, thank you. And I think, Anthony, I should give you an opportunity.
Thanks, Roger. I'm going to, first of all, state that the pandemic's been a bit of a challenge recently just for doing anything anywhere other than over a Zoom call, right? And so just the cost of taking data is harder than it was 2 years ago, right? And the cost of moving things out and, getting a sensor from someone else and putting it in place, and those collaborations have just been a little bit harder and more challenging to do. And so it's kind of it's put a drag or a tax on some of these operations, right? And that's the world we're in right now. The second thing I would just add is one of the challenges that our NOWRDC project faces is this idea of, I'm going to harp on data again. It's the public and private nature of data, right? A part of our core ideal is that the data needs to be public so that it can maximize the users of the data sets, right? But fully engaged in the industry, the industrial model is, well, the LiDAR data has to be private, has to remain private, because that's your proprietary information you're selling for. And so some of the folks that I've talked about doing validations at our site, they're like, well, hang on here, you're already serving the data publicly, so why am I even talking to you, right? And there's a core feedback there that is something that we have to get past to be able to have, and it's something that's stopping the growth of the industry, in my opinion, here in the US.
Anthony, thank you. Yeah, I completely concur. Thank you. I just have one final quick question in this part of the roundtable before I hand back to Carrie. And it's around next steps, but I guess I'm keen for you to think about, perhaps not just specifically for the projects that you're working with in these collaborations, or maybe actually, yeah, what next steps might look like in terms of not just your collaboration, but maybe in terms of commercialization, because innovation, yeah, I mean, everybody's got a different definition of innovation, but to me, it's an invention that touches the market. So actually, cool innovation is really good, but unless we deploy it, unless it contributes to this in the UK 100 gigawatts, then I get less interested. So yeah, Jenny, I just wondered if you had any kind of thoughts on particularly project next steps, but also the kind of the broader question around what can you do through this collaboration?
Yeah, so from a project perspective, we're at a really exciting step. We have instrumentation on wind turbines on both sides of the seas. We have all of the data come together. And so our next step is now comparing, interpreting, and analysing all of that information. Part of the commercialisation next step, I guess, is making that information available to people. It's about, again, sharing the data. So we have a big data sharing session coming up, public invite next week, where we're going to invite the stakeholders from across the supply chain to come and see what data we can see and what does that tell them about their assets and what could it do for them in the future. So for us, I think it's a big education piece. We really want to just get the outputs of the project out there, whether it be through presentations and white papers and those sorts of things. And we hope the technology will sell itself and be a benefit to the industry.
Thank you, Jenny. David.
Yes, from our side, it's really successful testing as part of this program supported by the bilateral. We're a small company with a novel technology, so for us it's about ensuring the project leverages commercialization, ensuring it leverages further additional private investment to accelerate the technology. And as I mentioned before, the badge of innovator, NOWRDC, really helps with reducing further investment risk. So it's a great help to us going forward.
Yeah. So really about facilitating that scale up that you need. Yes. Great. Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, so our immediate next steps are really evaluating the new models going into our open source tools for things like large array effects, impacts of atmospheric stability on both technologies of wake steering and layout optimization, and then releasing those models after we've validated against our large eddy simulations and the SCADA data made available through partners. But I think in the bigger picture, we're hoping to really drive the commercialization of these technologies by increasing confidence. So by building up the models, carrying out the evaluations in a public way, and sharing our results, we hope to make it much more possible that people can use these in their designs and have them ultimately certified.
Yeah, great. Completely understand. Yeah, it's about reducing cost and risk, so it can be investable, and those models really do underpin that. So thank you. And Anthony, I don't know whether you have anything to add from these great answers.
Yeah, no, these have been great answers. I guess for our project from the NOWRDC side, it's really the goal past NOWRDC is a self-sustaining center that is a long-term reference station that is able to break down the barriers of validation of new sensors and buoy-based systems for the industry. And then the model of having these validation activities occur, but yet the data be publicly available for the industry and research community is shown to be something that is viable for replication elsewhere. Because this can't be the only place in the US that we do this. And so we need to scale it up.
Great. Thank you. I'm happy to end this part of our fireside chat on the word scale up, because I think that's absolutely key and critical. We have a few minutes left before the Q&A session. We have a few questions that have been posted. So, Carrie, I'll hand back to you to conclude the fireside chat, and you can ask one or two of the final questions. Over to you, Carrie.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Roger. First I'll just say, at the consortium, just on the comments about collaboration and data, and one thing that we're seeing at the consortium, I think I mentioned at the start that we are currently funding 40 projects, soon to be more by the beginning of next year. And each one of those projects has multiple, they have a prime and then maybe multiple subcontractors or other parties engaged, and they might have an advisory board. The amount of collaboration that's happening is fantastic. It's also, I don't want to say chaotic, but you see from our purview at the consortium, all the different activities that are happening, even though we're not funding everything in offshore wind, of course, and every innovation and research, just our little chunk. It's just fascinating to me, the breadth of things that are being thought about. And I really hope that we, the consortium and with Innovate UK and others that do this, can continue to help be the glue to connect the dots for people, whether it be funding or conversation, discussion, sharing, or actually really we have a database that's anonymized that everybody can access, however that happens. There's just so much more of that to be organized, to happen in a way that really needs to happen quickly to get us. Roger, you mentioned the US goal is right now by this administration is 30 gigawatts by 2030. That's that's pretty amazing, and we have to do this so fast. So, my last kind of question for all of you is perhaps the most fun or the most challenging is just step back a bit from your specific projects today and, give us an idea about what's most useful for you, looking forward in terms of collaborations, like what kind of structures are most useful, really, what actually can work, because, sometimes things don't work well. We tried this, I don't know if it was an experiment or not, but really with Innovate UK and NOWRDC, and we definitely got something out of it. But what would you advise us if we were to say, gee, the research and innovation community, how can we help them, with a structure or program? What would be the number one thing you might say that would be useful in the next 2 years? So I'll put that to you for last round of questions from me. Anyone want to go first?
With a suggestion. One thing I suppose, and it is currently covered with other programs, but it's a very specific element of what these programs offer is access to facilities. So, having access to wind turbines and the costs that are involved with shutdown time for SMEs, it's a significant cost. And so I guess that would be a plea for me is any programs that can focus on giving technology providers access to live assets to be able to develop and test and validate the products would be hugely beneficial and support, I say, those sorts of agile, fast-moving SMEs who might not have as deep pockets to do the innovation, but have the expertise and the technologies and just need access to the assets themselves.
Great. Very helpful to hear that. Yeah. Anyone else? What would be on your wish list?
I want to put forward, Carrie, I think from our side, a framework to enable cross-fertilization of technologies. So maybe challenges that can be put up. I think often, particularly from our development, it was a novel technology that was used on another application, and then it was seen to be something that could be utilized within this damper system. So I think creating the environment where challenges could be put forward for people to come together and then form collaborations, and often they are bilateral by nature of things being very specific to meet specific challenges available in other markets.
Anyone have anything to add? Or
Yeah, Carrie, I might chime in just to echo on what David. I think David was talking specifically about a technology branching over into a different sector. I think the research community is a complete mirror of that, right? I mean, we're all kind of stovepipe in our own buildings and houses, and just having the cross-fertilization of ideas and research is going to lead to more innovation. You know, I'm an oceanographer by training, and so I'm new to this industry and still consider myself on the outside of it, but yet I've been working with folks in the industry for like the last 5 years, right? And so I've brought ideas to the table that they've run with, and quite vice versa. I've taken ideas from the industry kind of back to my own research, right? And so I think having those pathways open by like what David talked about, ideas that are or challenges that are thrown out there, or engagement activities that bring people across research lines together to sit down and say what's the hard thing in my sector, and find out what someone else's sector might be able to offer to that, is really the right way to innovate, right?
I'm really hoping, as I'm sure all of you are, that we eventually can actually sit down as well. The bulk of the consortium work over the past 2 years has been done during COVID, and it's worked. We've been stood up, we have projects, people are communicating. We will be running our next symposium next week, where the details of even some of your projects will be shared, and then the other 26, I did my math wrong, 36 projects will be made available. But again, and we'll have live Q&A, but it would be even more fantastic if we could really dig in person a bit on some of these. So I'm hoping we can do that, at least the consortium, and I'm sure my colleagues, other colleagues on the phone feel the same, that we can set up, some ways to make that happen outside of, I would say, the specific academic community as well, bringing in some of the commercial activities. We have a lot of developers that participate in the consortium, and that's a really helpful exchange as well. Really, what are their challenges, and then how can they adopt the work that you're doing, and hearing from them directly is quite useful. So, Chris, I think it's my job to turn it back to you now for audience questions, I think.
It is indeed, Carrie. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all our fireside chatters there. We've had quite a number of questions coming in from the audience, and unsurprisingly, as we've gone through this, you've answered a few of them as well as we've gone through. The questions fall broadly into two areas: one about the programme and the projects themselves, and some on the technology. And I'd like to start, really, if I can, looking at the programme. So a question for Carrie and Roger, I think, really to start with. And a number of people have commented, these projects look really good. There's fantastic progress here. The US-UK collaboration is excellent. How can we get involved? So the question is, how can we find partners in future, or to help build future UK-US projects? Roger or Carrie?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So for UK audience, you'll be aware, but for our US attendees, last week was the budget and spending review. So that's the process by which we get allocated funding. And one of the things that I'll be doing is to make a very, very strong case to replicate and to build, not just on this programme, this initiative with NOWRDC, but some of the other UK-US initiatives we've started now with, for example, ARPA-E. So I believe we have a really strong foundation on which to build. And as part of that, our experience, which I'm sure Carrie will concur, is that these partnerships don't happen on their own, and we need to work really hard to build them. So once we've been able to allocate some funding and a broad scope for a follow-on programme, we'll also be thinking and investing time and money on helping to build those collaborations. And Chris, as chair, is probably could answer this part very well as well. The KTN is all about networking and building those partnerships, and the innovation really does happen when we build those new relationships and those new partnerships. And in particular, we build relationships and partnerships with sectors that don't traditionally work together. So that's something that we're going to tackle head on with our follow-on programs. Nothing's yet confirmed, and I might sound a little bit like a politician when I say that I can't give you a firm date on when we might launch our next UK-US initiative, but I think I have a sufficient business case in order to do that, and I'll be working very hard to secure the funding to do something. Carrie, I don't know whether you wanted to embellish that answer somewhat.
Not on the specific formal funding piece, but I will offer that the consortium, even somewhat informally, has engaged with and is helping to match entities. Right? Really, we just do that every day without even a formal program. We've had a couple pitch sessions where we've had research entities pitch to private sector, not for investment funding, but just to share what they're working on. And those have been quite successful. We'll probably do another one this winter. So even without a formal program, we see our role, and one of the benefits that we have, that we've come to this conclusion the past few years, is actually connecting the dots. So I would say to anyone, feel free to reach out to myself, any of my program managers, and everything's listed on the website. We're happy to make those connections and pay attention, because we do often schedule events just to have people share what they're working on. And in part, I'm sure David can relate to this. Often it's more difficult sometimes for the smaller companies that aren't well known in the supply chain yet, or they have a new innovation. We're trying to provide a platform for those folks to get together as well with counterparts, in the UK and elsewhere too. So hope to have a more formal structure, but we also informally make this part of our job every day. So yeah.
And I guess, Carrie, your symposium is a good way, certainly for European-based innovators, to really understand, what's happening and the projects that you're funding, and perhaps to create an additional connection through that event next week. Is it next week? Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Thanks for the free advertising.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, and I know we want to hear from our speakers, but yeah, it's the first 3 days of next week. It's virtual and recorded. You can watch things live. You can watch things recorded. It'll be available. You can get into the details of some of the projects that were presented here, or all the projects presented here, or, as I said, any of our other projects. So great way to understand what's technically happening in the meat of the projects. So sorry, Chris.
No, not at all. There's lots of good information there. And I think your point on the informal links and joining the dots that are there, this is stuff that doesn't just happen within the bounds of a formal process. This is, the gates are open, the channels of communication are open, and we're here to make this happen. So don't wait for something to appear. If you've got a question, ask it and see if you can get in touch with the folk that, the folk around this table can help you with that. Excellent. Another question then that lands both sides of the ocean. Maybe I could pose this to perhaps David first and then Paul. And an interesting one. What's your experience been on working with two funding bodies across the ocean? How's that worked? And any advice for future project managers? I would add to this that I've seen an awful lot of the work that's gone behind the scenes in making these things line up. So I suspect there's a real swan effect in what's been going on here. But how's that work for you guys?
It's works very well, and it's working very well for us. I think you're definitely correct that behind the scenes there's been some hard work from the two bodies to make sure that's happened, which has benefited us. But so far for us, very smooth. We have a collaborative project management, and we also there also are the separate reporting lines into the two distinct programs. But nothing other than praise for the way it's been arranged for us. It's been a great benefit.
So thank you. Great stuff. Yeah.
Chris, I'll just say, you said, I love the analogy, the swan analogy of what's going on under the water. One thing that we did do, and Roger and I really worked hard on this, is we tried to match up the timing so that the contracting could really work tongue and groove a little bit, and that is not easy. And I should say that I really appreciate Roger and others, because while we had a formal structure, we also just kind of worked through things and had a lot of flexibility. But the contracting can be really challenging, particularly for some smaller entities that might be first to this kind of funding. We learned a lot from doing that, and made a lot of improvements over time too. So.
Excellent. No, thanks very much, Carrie. And again, you raised the point there. It's engaging the willing, the people that want to make this thing work. You can bang your head against the wall in trying to move a system that doesn't want to be moved, but engaging with folk that want to do good stuff. That's what all this is about, which is really good. A technical question now, really, and I think this probably would go to Jenny and to Anthony as well, really. So the first question is Jenny, what are some of the current challenges in wind farm maintenance? And leading on from that, could digital solutions help with performing that maintenance properly? So not so much the optimization of the periodicity, but actually performing it. And then Anthony, perhaps you might be able to pick up on that in one of the interesting questions is, what types of repairs and snags, I suppose, are common following issues you detect on SCADA sensors? So perhaps Jenny first.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose we would say probably the challenges are less in what needs doing in the maintenance and more about understanding whether it needs doing or not, and how much it costs in time and money and risk life and all of those things, carbon emissions, to physically attend the sites to check and do precautionary maintenance. So the digital solutions that we see in contributing to that challenge are around remotely monitoring the assets, being able to make people more informed and move towards a proactive maintenance regime. Ultimately, to bring down the levelized cost of energy, I think it's fairly widely recognised that around 90% of the levelized cost of energy is associated with operations and maintenance costs, and about 30% of that is spent on inspection. So there's a huge challenge there, and it's not about how do we do this necessarily. Although if you're remotely monitoring something with a sensor that can, for instance, shut down the system when the temperature is exceeding a maximum tolerance, those sorts of things with a precautionary basis. But it's not about necessarily doing the maintenance. People know how to do the maintenance. They just need to know when to do it for maximum benefit.
Indeed, very much so. And Anthony, what sort of things do you see coming out of the SCADA information that perhaps can help feed into that in knowing what needs to be done, but then helping systems like Jenny's decide how best that can be optimized?
Right. Yeah, keying off what Jenny just said there at the end, it's really helpful when people go out in the field and they know exactly what needs to be fixed, right? If they go out kind of not knowing, then you're going to waste time, you're going to waste money, and trips out to an offshore platform are just super expensive even before you leave the dock, right? And so having enough SCADA data or other ancillary data that tells you, exactly what are the conditions you're going to get. You can get on the tower, the waves are good enough, or your systems are go to get on the tower, and you can get the work that you need to get done because you know exactly what's broken, right? So having some of those extra sensors that come back and tell you, monitor the health of a LiDAR system, or some of the software systems that monitor how the sensors are performing over time to understand, whether or not the quality of them is degrading, and so you might need to speed up the replacement of that sensor, or go out and do some maintenance for it, are just key for it. A lot of times, we on our tower go by the idea of, if it's something that we could just swap out with a new one, let's just do it, because in the end of the day, the sensor is much less expensive than the person's time and the boat time to get it done, right? And so by speeding up that aspect of having the spares ready to go, having a good idea of what's broken is really important. And so, everyone talks about big data. I'm a huge proponent of big data quality as well. And that's something that it doesn't really, that last word kind of falls off, right? A lot of people's tongues when they're talking about it. And so having good software solutions and good technicians that are able to say, hey, this sensor is broken because of this reason, and I've seen this before, this is exactly what needs to be fixed, is just critical to lowering your operation maintenance task. Jenny mentioned that most of the budget in these systems is operation maintenance, and that's true for us as well for maintaining sensors, right? It's not the sensor cost, it's the cost to maintain them and put people safely on the platform and have them do their work. That's where the money gets spent. And so if we can get these sensors monitored specifically, so again, the sensor data feed is one thing, secure communications to make sure you have alternate paths to get the data from it, but then the software systems on land ready to go and running in the background that can sense when something's happened, and then put that in front of the eyes of a technician who knows what they're looking at to say, okay, well, I think it's this problem, and so let's go fix that.
No, that's really, really interesting, and that data quality piece resonates strong. Coming from a maintenance background myself, this really appeals to the geek in me. So I could spend ages talking about this, and indeed on the numerous other questions that we have here. But unfortunately, we've run out of time to go through any more questions. And thank you very much for answering those, and the fireside chat that went along before that. I think what I'd like to do to go to some closing remarks there, if you may, hand back to Peter, and he'll put some closing remarks in and draw us towards a close. Peter.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Chris. Thank you to Carrie and to Roger and to all of those representing the 4 projects today. It's been an incredibly stimulating conversation, and I just close with a few words, really. We talked about at the beginning this extraordinary new ambition for really scaling up offshore wind across the United States, across the UK. And in order to enable that joint ambition for 70 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, you really, really need innovation to be able to meet that challenge. And I think some of the things that we talked about, some of the benefits of collaboration, more opportunities for geographical spread, more data, a bigger pool for partners, enables you to scale up quickly, I think are all absolutely relevant in helping our governments meet that ambition. I think it was Anthony who said, you know, one of the best, I think, most significant benefits of this kind of level of collaboration is the cross-fertilization, bringing folks across the research line, as Anthony put it, is the best way to innovate. And I think I couldn't agree more. And I think what I'm also really heartened by is the clear appetite for further partnerships. This is not the end. There's lots more interest in doing more UK-US collaboration. So I do hope that Roger's business case that he said he's going to put forward is a successful one, and that there will be more funding and more opportunity available in the future. I should say, just to make a quick plug for my own team, we have a fantastic science and innovation network in Boston. We've got 2 brilliant ladies who work for us here, and they're a great starting point for folks who want to explore the possibility of joining research with funding opportunities. So if folks are interested, they can get in touch with the Science and Innovation team at the British Consortium in Boston. I think that's all from me. Again, a huge thank you to everybody for making this seminar such a success. Please do tune in to the UNFCCC and COP26 websites to follow COP26 as we go through this first week and then into the last week next week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, many thanks to our presenters for, well, without whom this wouldn't have been possible, and for their peek into the cutting edge work that's been done to help ensure the delivery of low carbon energy. And also thanks to you, the audience, for turning up. So without you, this wouldn't have been a worthwhile event. We really do appreciate you being here with us. There will be a link to the recording for this that will be sent out, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.